Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman, Dr. Scott Bradley, talking about the incredible webinar that took place last night. Q&As on the Constitution and more. Check it out. Look for... What do you look for? You go to freedomsrisingsun.com and you get your ticket to ride. You get your pass to attend if you want to be part of it live. And then you go look on BitChute or Rumble and you look for Freedom's Call is what you do. And you get all that done and you can check out the webinar and or participate if you get your pass to join. It's free. It's just that we want to have people, join intentionally there. And then that way you can participate in the webinar. Well, in the webinar, we're talking about several different things. We're talking about the petroleum, the gas, if you will, the oil in America being depleted. And, buddy, we're less than half. We're 60% down. And when it's gone, it's gone. And the big problem with all this, as far as I can tell, is we haven't taken the opportunity to become independent either. Okay, the oil that we get from different places in the world have different refinery, necessities, if you will. It isn't the same. Oil is not just oil. There's different kinds of oil and different ways that it's refined and turned into fuel for your car and everything else. It's not all the same. And we haven't taken the time to become independent either. We've had a pretty good window if we'd get after it, but we're wasting time and depleting our reserves, and it's not looking good on either end of that, Dr. Scott Bradley.
Well, we really do have a pretty good oil production capability in the United States, but we sell it on the world market, and the world market drives our pricing, and the world market is being depleted very quickly when 20% of the oil that was coming out of the Straits of Hormuz have now been put a cork in it for now. So all of this stuff, some of the countries, China, for example, has a great strategic petroleum reserve also, but these Asian countries are depleting theirs too. And here's the deal. When it's gone, the big oil companies right now are tasked with draining this off and selling it. They're making really good money. They're committing to replace it when the price is lower after this big kerfuffle is done, and it's just going on and on and on. They'll make big profits on that end too. But in the middle are the consumers. I mean, the price of all goods goes up as these things are depleted to the point that the price is driven up. Food production, delivery, groceries, factories, distribution of all products. Oil is used in a vast array of products also. These things are reaching perhaps a critical point. If you're under 300 million barrels and you started with 715 million, do the math. This stuff, there's a crossover point. Everything it's frangible. It's basically, it's not something that just wave a magic wand and it's there. It's kind of like our munitions. If you use them all up, you don't wave a magic wand and the next week you get replenished. These things take years, and this strategic petroleum reserve is just one of these critical components that is becoming more critical because of this self-inflicted wound that we have by choice, not we, not you, not me, not the vast American population, but a single monarch in the United States said, we're going to war on behalf of Israel. And it's one of those things where the off-ramp is really, really... Let me just give you an example. September of 1980, for example, Saddam Hussein invaded Iran. He thought, well, we're going to take advantage of the turmoil in Iran right now. In just a few weeks, a short period of time, we are going to be able to subdue these guys, and it'll be a pretty cool thing. We'll have a big victory. Well, 3 months later, in December, they had pushed into Iran between 50 and 75 miles. They bogged down. It became trench warfare. They invaded, by the way, the Abadan area, in the refinery area that Iran has moved their tanks to. We talked about that last week. Anyway, so all of this idea, Iraq invaded, and 8 years later, they were still bogged down in this, and they reached a ceasefire, UN-negotiated ceasefire, and it was one of those things where they thought it was a steamroll. And the United States and Israel thought the same thing. And Iran proved to be more tenacious and everything was tenuous along that point. And there were the highest amounts I've seen in deaths was 2 to 3 million people. The lowest I've seen is 500,000. But that's what
either way, it's disaster. One death is too many.
Absolutely. But see, that's the problem. A boots on the ground war, it has huge casualties. And so even if it was just a 500,000 people in that period of time, I think it was much higher. But the fact of the matter is the imbecilic approach to this that happened beginning February 28th, well, it'll be a few days, maybe a couple, 2 or 3 weeks at most. Here we're 6 months into it. And to tell you the truth, I think that Iran is in a stronger position now than they were.
It's
far. A large nation. It's a fortress nation from the mountain ranges to the deserts to the isolation
They've
points.
got ability over land like you wouldn't believe to some of the most evil partners in the world. And it's just not looking good for us on that front. But turning domestically a little bit, Doctor, because I believe there's sleeper cells in America, and I believe they, fired a shot across the bow when they're tampering with some of these water plants. They didn't do mass damage and get people sick and kill people like they could have, but they did, mess with the valves and the different things and flooded some places. And they showed that, hey, you think you got safety in America, you don't. And so they're kind of keeping it hush-hush on it and acting like they don't know where it came from and everything. But I'm convinced that there was a message clearly sent, and I think it can get worse in seconds if we're not careful. But also thinking domestically, though, we don't have any troops here to help us if we ever were attacked internally. We've got all of our troops all overseas everywhere else. We're so spread thin. We've got these long supply chains. We've got troops that have been there forever, and they're worn out and tired and gone. And so if we had a domestic disturbance that was on a real scale, I don't mean just a riot where someone's mad because they, CO2 or they want to be tree huggers or they're mad because they think Donald's a racist or whatever they're mad about today, or the transgender, whatever battle they've got cooking to deceive the people and create mischief and division in the land. But if we had a real uprising of any kind, we wouldn't be able to handle it at all. The American people would have to stand up and bring back the militia in about 2 seconds to take care of business and stop the rebellions. But we're now seeing some movement on the Second Amendment, right?
Yeah, got to hang with me a little bit on this, because a lot of the chicken littles, ointed offals, the Karens, the snowflakes, whatever you want to call them, are just about having a stroke over this thing.
Yeah.
But stick with me for just a second here. Sam, let's just say you were a felon. I know you're not.
Yeah.
But,
Donald is, I'm not. Yeah, that's right.
You're not a violent soul or anything like that.
That's right.
But currently, if you're a convicted felon, you cannot have any Second Amendment rights.
Now, let me stop you there and say I have an absolute constitutional problem with that, though.
Well, that's the problem.
Because if you paid your debt to society, in other words, you've properly repented and done what you've been told to do, to remedy that at some point, you can't have this thing hanging over your head forever, that you can never be forgiven or never rise above any mistakes that you've made. There's a problem with that fundamentally from a moral character of the nation, to where, look, if you've taken care of all that we've asked you to do, gone to jail, done your probation, whatever, the penalties are for your crimes, so to speak, at some point you should be made a first-class citizen again. You're going to steal your Second Amendment because you're a second-class citizen stuff is absolute against our founders' intent, Doctor. Well,
here's those inalienable rights things, and that Bill of Rights protected those. But for decades, many decades now, felons have been prevented from having a Second Amendment right. Now, just think for a second, okay, speech, press, assembly, privacy, jury trials. I mean, you take your list off of the Bill of Rights and say, no, you're a felon. You don't get a jury trial anymore. Oh, no, you don't have any freedom of speech. No, you can't write anything. Oh, no, you can't go worship the way you want. All of these kinds of things are those inalienable rights that were preserved and protected, canonized, if you will, that existed before the Bill of Rights existed. And people are saying, no, you can't do this Second Amendment. Now, there's been a movement for a while. And what's happening, and I know time is always of the essence, but basically they're moving to restoring those rights for certain felons. I mean, if you're an undocumented immigrant, for example, or a registered sex offender, or those convicted of violent crimes, this isn't going to happen. But let's just say you were a tax protester, or you filed your taxes wrong, got caught, got convicted, and you're a felon now. I mean, most CPAs that I know are pretty buttoned down people. They're not prone to violence or, any kind of thing that could disrupt society. They just didn't do their taxes. Okay, so those kinds of people, I'm just looking here real quickly.
I'm kind of a redneck, ladies and gentlemen, and rights and privileges are two different things. Governments grant privileges. Rights are retained by we the people as we delegate limited authority to government. And so if I have a right to keep and bear arms and I've fulfilled my responsibility to society, then they shouldn't be able to take that right from me. It's that simple. Let's go ahead and skip the break if you don't mind, Liz, because we're running out of time. The doctor's right on that. But all I'm telling you is they're thinking about giving some of these,
restoring
rights or whatever you want to call it back to the people and not interfering with them. And I think it's a start in the right direction, Doctor.
25th of September, they say the application process is going to open up for these invited candidates, if you will. But the fact of the matter is that they're saying they think about 1/3 people will be affected by this. I think it's much larger than that. I think it's 2 to 3 million.
3 million people, yeah.
Yeah, and so here's the deal. There's those that don't want this to happen, big time. They will not, and they're using it as a infringement right upon the Second Amendment. And they could, theoretically, slow roll this thing to the end of everybody's life. And so they're going to have to stand tall and process these things. Yeah, they're going to have to be careful they don't get any violent criminals in there. But there have been court decisions in recent years where some of the courts are saying, you know what, here's a gangbanger that wasn't involved in any big, personal violence or anything like that. You can't take away his Second Amendment right. This thing is coming, and the Department of Justice is involving themselves to this, and there's much more to be talked about in the time we've got.
All I'm saying is I think it should have happened a long time ago. We should have never tried to strip them of their rights in the first place. Again, there is forgiveness in this world and in the next, and repentance is a real thing, and we need to kind of understand that. And we need to realize these are rights, not privileges, ladies and gentlemen. That's, in my mind, the summary of what's important, right?
Well, you talk about these granting of privileges and how we've defined so many things in a way that the founders never did. The idea of a driver license, for example. Oh, it's a privilege.
Yeah, what do you need one of those for?
Yeah, that's the problem. Is you can't. What we're doing is redefining so much of what the founding fathers did. And some of the Supreme Court decisions are now saying, if you can't find an analogous kind of situation, some of these felonies, for example, that people have been convicted of, they didn't exist. They didn't even exist as misdemeanors, if you will, in times past. There was no law about them. And so we've turned no law into misdemeanors, into felonies.
Well, the more immoral of a people we become and the more we violate God's laws, the more we have to have government-mandated regulations. That's just reality. Wicked people need lots of rules and laws and guidance and this kind of stuff. Righteous people don't need a lot of rules and guidance. And the Tocqueville, back in the day, highlighted that reality big time as well. But we got to get to some of these other topics, too, though. Syria is developing nuclear components, so is Iran. And we pretend we're stopping them, but we're not even close, Doctor, on either score.
Well, here's the deal. Syria, how long ago was it? It was Trump's first administration. We were sending Tomahawk missiles into Syria. And Israel wanted Syria overthrown. Assad was a Shiite it's a strange perversion of Shiite. But at any rate, so we were sending Tomahawk missiles into Syria. Okay, we funded, we created, we trained, we encouraged a group that became ISIS. And they got too big for their britches, and because the Russians and the Kurds were there, it got kind of kiboshed some. We couldn't stop it, though. And so this ISIS group is now in charge. Well, the guy that's the head of Syria right now was ISIS, and he said, no, I've repented of all of that stuff, and I'm a good guy now, and Trump's met with him, and everything's cool. But they had, and they continue to have, a program where they develop nuclear components. Now, no, they're going to be okay. They're just doing it for commercial purposes. Okay, that's what Iran was doing them for. We had an international agreement with multiple nations. Trump tore it up in his first administration. It basically released the Iranians to do whatever they darn well pleased. And so suddenly we're going out and bombing them on surreptitious missions. And now we're in this extended war with them, and Syria's doing it, and we're cool about that. Well, just think about ISIS. The last news break, we had a woman in New York that has ties to ISIS, they say, and she was trying to blow up the state legislature in New York. Well, just a minute. That's ISIS, and they've got ties to ISIS in Syria. What would it take to have this thing go upside down and backwards also? And so here we have kind of a double standard in a way, where
it's a double standard, and it's all the whim of Benjamin Netanyahu and what other president in the United States is so finicky on this. They have different views and this and that, and pretty soon, if we're not very careful, we'll get a socialist president elected, and they'll back Palestine, and then we'll be on the other side of the discussion and debate. And all I'm telling you is, every time we involve ourselves in these foreign affairs, we're in trouble. Who are we to say the Iranians and or the Syrians can't work with nuclear power?
Yeah.
Okay,
exactly.
That's the problem. And we think we can decide, and we think we can just be whatever we decide or think today is the deal. And that's, other nations aren't going to tolerate that. And therefore, there's going to be war. Now, I'm not saying we're going to be all peaceful if we, get out of it. But I will say this, the likelihood of us being the spend us into oblivion and the war mentality. And, people lose more liberties under wartime than any other time of all. And people aren't seeing that under Trump because they've got Trump derangement syndrome. They either hate Donald or love Donald. But in either case, they're not able to fairly assess what's really happening in America. I mean, we've had literally 47 years of acrimony between the United States and Iran alone. We're not even close to solving this, Doctor.
Well, we're not. And that little 47-year connection is something we get a lot. And I got a question last night that we answered about that it was like, look, we've been at war with Iran for more than 47 years. Trump finally took action, long overdue. We just need to win this war and be done with it. And I went back and did an historical review. And I don't know where the ledger actually is in terms of who ought to be madder and who has more justification for being mad. Well, the United States has been at
We're on the wrong side of it, buddy.
We are on the wrong side.
We're in their land. That tells you the whole story. We ought not be in their land. See, whenever we decide we're going to go on the offensive and gallivant into other people's lands, we're in the wrong, Doctor. It's very simple.
Well, it is. And I think, by the way, that's why Robert E. Lee failed in the Civil War, was because he took the war into the North. If they had fought a defensive war, they probably would have won. And it's a stretch. We could talk about why or how. But the fact of the matter is, we have been at every hinge point in Iran. I mean, whether it's we overthrow their elected government in 1953, the CIA goes in there at the behest of Eisenhower. We install the Shah. We have a U.S. puppet there. The revolutionaries had all this steamed up anger about that kind of stuff. They captured the embassy in 1979. In 1980, Iraq invades Iran. Whose side were we on? We were on Iraq's side. We provided support in this war we just mentioned a few minutes ago that killed anywhere from 500,000 to 3 million in that region. And there's anger. Oh, let's talk for just a second here. In 1988, the USS Vincennes shot down an Iranian flight. It was Flight 655, an Airbus 300 passenger plane over the Strait of Hormuz. That's probably the first time anybody in America heard about that strait. It was a regular commercial flight from Tehran to Dubai. And we shoot down 290 human beings out of the air. 66 were children, if I recall correctly, but that doesn't really matter. They were all innocent. And here's the deal. We never said, oopsie, we made a big mistake. We're so sorry. We paid some compensation that was totally inadequate, and we walked away. If Iran had shot down...
we shouldn't have been there. We wouldn't have had to pay any compensation, adequate or not. And that's the problem. Now, Donald Trump is going to be meeting with the North Korean leader. Again, he basically is highlighting, kind of saying they're fantastic and stuff. Trump says he plans another meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong Un. He says, hey, North Korea has powerful nukes, but no date for a meeting was announced. So this is, again, where Donald's saying, I'm meeting with people, and there's no evidence that he really is. So it's very strange, Doctor. But why meet with the North Korean leader right now? Doesn't that just add insult to injury?
Well, it's one of those things where Donald Trump seems to he loses sight of the ball. Keep your eye on the ball, kids.
I'm not saying talking to other people is a bad idea. I'm just saying in this scenario right now, what are you trying to do? Get North Korea to be on our side? What good's that going to do? See, now if you were to say, if you were saying we're going to stay out of it and let's calm the world down, I get those conversations. But if you're saying pick us over Iran, you're going into a losing discussion, Doctor.
Well, yeah, it's not going to happen. Iran is being supported through the Soviets and China, and North Korea is funding or at least adding technology and stuff like that to that mix. It's a very interesting scenario, and for some reason, Trump takes these meetings as being some kind of ego stroke or centralizing. I don't know what it is. And by the way, just very briefly, I know we don't have time to go off on this tangent, but holy cow, when he thought he was under threat in Turkey, it was based on Israeli intelligence that nobody else had. He skedaddles out of there, dumps Air Force One. They made it personal. Netanyahu, again, made it personal. He knows how to pull Trump's strings. And so Trump dances any way they want. And he bails out of Turkey because Air Force One might get shot down. One of the things the Iranians haven't done yet is assassinate a head of state. We have.
Many times we have.
Yeah.
Let's not just say we have. Let's be clear. We've done it a bunch.
We do it. But that's the thing. Iran hasn't at this point, and so I don't know how big the threat really was, but Netanyahu's intelligence group said, Donald, you're a danger, so go out in a
Everything's a threat to Israel, though, because they have this mindset that they love war.
Well, what they do is they keep us engaged by doing these fear tactics, and Donald Trump felt personally threatened, I guess, by this, and they went out the back door on a beverage cart. And he sent the rest of his people, the whole Washington press corps, the Secretary of State out on Air Force One. Hey, there goes a good decoy, guys. Live bodies on board this thing. Why the heck did they go there if they thought they had this kind of risk to begin with?
Well, let's talk about the welfare clause really quick. I know we don't have time, but a couple clarity lines would make sense on this thing, Doctor.
Okay, boy, we got to close in about 2 minutes. The welfare clause in both the preamble and in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 has nothing whatsoever to do with the redistribution of wealth. The definition of terms that was used by the Founding Fathers in the beginning era and using that clause was clearly understood in those days to be a stability and a predictability in government. And it had nothing to do with redistributing wealth. That's Marxist, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. And we have twisted that. In 1936, the Supreme Court, in this FDR influence, they said, oh, no, welfare can mean anything to do with money. And so today we are using a perverse definition for that, and probably 80% of what the Congress does now violates not just the welfare clause, but constitutional principles. And so the welfare clause is being used as a justification to redistribute wealth in a Marxist, socialist kind of program. And Americans need to come to understand that it's not a dole. It doesn't talk about that. It's not a government handout. And we today need to restore the original intent. Or in fact,
well, ladies and gentlemen, all I can tell you is it's important for us to really think about and understand the supreme law of our land. I believe our goal is to return to that. And if we could do that soon, the better off would be. The problem is we don't seem to take it seriously enough. And in America, we better understand the supreme law of the land and apply it immediately. And if we don't, we're going to be off into the socialist land of Confucius and godlessness and everything else. And when that happens, rights become privileges, become denials. And then you have no rights at all. And a tyranny mecca is what our future looks like if we don't double down and double down soon. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Sam Bushman. Dr. Bradley's with me, freedomsrisingsun.com, libertyroundtable.com. God save our constitutional republic.